The $70 price tag isn't working and games are flopping left and right. But will it ever work? And is there more to it? Well, as you're going to see here, guys, there is a lot more to it. And we're going to break it down exactly what's happening because I find it absolutely fascinating when you start crunching the numbers and start looking at exactly what is moving, what isn't moving, and what the industry is going to do going forward. Because there is a number of surprising and alarming flops that I think that developers should absolutely take notice of as the market moves to the whim of the consumers. And it's going to go back to what I discussed before with $70 games and how the consumers are going to decide whether it's for it or not. Now, let's go and get into this, guys. This whole thing started when Sony announced that they were going to do $70 games. That got the ball rolling on this $70 games price point. Now, I'm not blaming them completely for everything. I think all developers, publishers can all make their own decisions, but that's when we first heard about the price jump with the PlayStation 5 games going up to $70. And there's been hot debate left and right on what's happening with $70 games. Some people have argued that inflation has caused games to be cheap over the years. If you look at the price of everything else with food and movie tickets and everything, that's all went up substantially where games have stayed the same price for quite some time. Now, others have cried foul saying, well, no, games aren't worth $70. They already make enough off of microtransactions and DLC and also other things that they do to get us to spend more money in a game. And I think both can be right at the end of the day. But now we have other things that are happening, right? With this big $70 price point. Microsoft has announced that they will be doing $70 games, although they have Game Pass, so we'll talk about that in just a bit. Also, third-party developers have been doing $70 games for a while now, but we are going to get into the issue here with that, and Nintendo has also followed in the footstep, kinda, when it comes down to it. And things aren't going all according to plan with the $70 thing. Now, let's get into it first here, guys. Let's look at Sony's big first-party games, because I'm sure a lot of you guys are saying, okay, well, God of War and also Horizon, those did great at $70. Well, yes and no. But let's take a look at everything here, right? $70 from the start. Returnal, Ratchet & Clank, Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo, God of War Ragnarok. Yes, those games have sold good to great from what we know, but we don't necessarily know everything with the sales. Sony does not update their sales numbers like Nintendo does at the investor meeting. So we don't know exactly where Returnal did. We don't know exactly where Ratchet is. We just have an idea from what Sony has announced, but they don't give updated numbers. And these games are going on a year plus old now at this point. Now we know that Horizon Forbidden West, they haven't necessarily completely announced the split between PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 plus bundled sales. Same goes for God of War Ragnarok. So while you can say, oh, well, those sold really well according to Sony, we don't know the splits. We don't know how much was bundled. We don't know how much it was the PS4 version. We don't know how much was the PS5 version because there were different prices for them. Horizon Forbidden West was not $70 on PS4. It was $70 on PS5, and it was $60 on PS4 that you can get a free upgrade for PS5. But the only difference is the box art, right? Like you can just pay for the PS4 version and get the free upgrade. So we just don't exactly know what the split was between that. Now, I still feel that it probably did good or better on PS5. We just don't know the split. Gran Turismo also had a PS4 version as well. God of War Ragnarok bundles PS4 version, so we just don't know the split yet. So I think the $70 thing is working for Sony, but I'm not 100% sure based on them not giving us details on the split between PS4 version that's cheaper and the PS5 version and exactly how much is bundled in, where it's like maybe you get a little bit of a discount with the bundle, right, based on where you buy it from. So it's hard to tell, but I would say that Sony's okay at this point, especially considering how much they've been selling. Now, we've seen all of this stuff with PS4 and PS5 and kind of what's going on there. But when it comes to Microsoft and the whole $70 thing, they just recently announced that they will be jumping their price up to $70, but it's almost like a irrelevant point, right? Especially considering Microsoft is trying to push Game Pass, Game Pass, Game Pass. All the hardest core Microsoft people are into Game Pass. So you're not going to be spending $70 on these games. You're going to be spending your Game Pass subscription on a lot of these games. So the impact of $70 games isn't going to hit Microsoft like it's going to hit Sony, or like it's hit Sony and some of these other third-party companies that we will get into. So it's a bit skewed with Microsoft. So the jury's out on that, right? Now, Nintendo has one $70 MSRP game, and that is Tears of the Kingdom. Now, so far, the pre-orders have been spectacular. On Amazon, #1 game already. In Japan, it's already blowing past Breath of the Wild pre-orders, which makes sense. Obviously, a lot more Nintendo Switches at this point than before, when the Switch hasn't even launched and people were pre-ordering back then. So it's safe to say that Tears of the Kingdom will probably do really well even at $70. So I think that's safe to say. Now, where the major problem lies are with certain third-party games, and the whole basis for this video, at least. Now, we've seen a number of these games jump up to $70 on PS5 and Xbox Series, only to be discounted near instantly or have disappointing sales numbers. Now, the Callisto Protocol, Forspoken, Wild Hearts, and to a much lesser degree, Dead Space, have all dropped from that $70 price tag fairly quickly and didn't really light up the sales charts, and pretty much people are looking at like, old news. Now, once again, Dead Space, a little bit of a different category. Yes, it's dropped in price, but it did do okay in the NPD sales charts. It seems like it did all right. We don't have any updated numbers at this point from EA or anything, but that definitely seems to have done better than the other games. But the price is dropping rapidly on that game. Now, I personally feel that if you're going to charge $70 for your game, you should make sure that the Metacritic score is higher than the price of the game. I think that there is definitely going to be a problem if your Metacritic score isn't higher than your price of the game after tax, especially in some of these high tax places that we have here, like Florida or like California. Man, the tax really racks up. So I think that should be like the rule of thumb. But joking aside here, guys, I think it's going to be very rough for a lot of these developers that think that their games are worth $70 stacked up against Horizon Forbidden West, against God of War Ragnarok, against The Legend of Zelda, against Final Fantasy. I don't think that this is a good idea, and it's not working based on what I'm seeing here, especially a game like Wild Hearts, right? This is a copy or a clone or a game that's inspired by Monster Hunter, a little bit of Fortnite, a little bit of everything, right? It's a big EA Originals game. It's also Koei Tecmo. I don't know what they're thinking as a brand new IP, jumping into it when you don't have the repertoire, you don't have the clout, you don't have the sales of what Capcom has with Monster Hunter World or Monster Hunter Rise, which also just launched on PlayStation and Xbox, that you can get way cheaper, and also you can get so much more content. I don't know what they're thinking in their mind to launch at $70. I get that the game looks impressive and everything, but launching that game at $70 was a mistake. Callisto Protocol, new IP, launching that game at $70 is a mistake. Forspoken, new IP, launching that game at $70 is a mistake. These are not established franchises, and a lot of these games have less content and less value than other games that are coming out right alongside with it, where you can buy for $60 and get a game that has way more value or even cheaper than that. So this isn't working. This $70 standard, if it's PS5 and all that, is absolutely not working. I don't care what frame rate you're running at. I don't care what resolution you're touting. I don't care how good you think your graphics are. That's fantastic. That's great. But just because you've got good graphics doesn't mean your game is worth $70. And the market, like I said, is going to determine and dictate these things. Whether you go out there and spend your hard-earned cash, that is going to be it. Not going on Twitter and ranting and raving about this or about that, but where you actually spend your money. And the market seems to be responding. The Wild Hearts thing was wild, in my opinion, no pun intended, because that game just recently came out and it's already being discounted in multiple different places. I follow two guys. We got CheapyD, and we also have Royal64, and they're posting deals for used copies for way under, and also sometimes even brand new copies, $10, $20 under, and a lot of these games just launched recently. So to me, it's not working. It's not working, and it's like a 50-50 or like a 70-30 on if it's even working 100% for Sony at this point, since we don't know splits, and because they don't tell us, you know, in terms of the bundle sales compared to everything. We just can't see exactly how it is. But I'm guessing that it's going pretty well for games like God of War Ragnarok or games like Horizon Forbidden West when it comes to the $70 price tag, or even Gran Turismo for that $70 price tag. So in all, guys, when you look at it, this is what I think when it comes to $70, if it's working or what's going to happen. The biggest games, the next God of War, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 Remake Part 2. These large franchises with tons of clout, with millions of fans, with Game of the Year awards, with all sorts of history, they can do $70 games. That will work for them. But these new IPs, these mid-range franchises, these type of games are getting absolutely bodied. You better hope, or you better make sure that if you're going to charge $70 for your game, it better be at 84, 85 plus on Metacritic. It better be something that's really popular, like Hogwarts, or something like the From Software games, Elden Ring. It's got to have some type of clout to it. It's got to have some type of popularity to it, especially with these development times and resources getting so high. It's not working. It is not working. Developers, rethink what you think your game is worth, because that $70 might only be $10, but if you're trying to get a new IP off the ground, or if you're trying to be in this competitive gaming market when there's all sorts of value, there's free-to-play games, there's games that are already discounted that people haven't bought, there's all sorts of stuff that people can buy instead, you really got to look at what you're going to launch your game with at that price. Now, yes, the discounts are going to come later and all that, but by then people have already forgotten about your game if it isn't the cream of the crop, like a God of War, or like a Zelda, or like a Final Fantasy, or like a Horizon. So it's really going to fall by the wayside, especially when you have a lot of these really good games that you can get for cheaper, like an Elden Ring that launched at $60 across PlayStation 5 all the way to PS4, Xbox One, PC, and all of that, and we're seeing discounts on that game too. So to me, based off of the analysis that I'm looking at, and based off the sales numbers that I'm seeing here and the sales charts, the $70 price tag isn't working 100%. It isn't working 100%, and we need more information on what's going on when it comes to Sony, but I feel that their biggest franchises will be okay. Nintendo, it needs to be incredibly selective when Nintendo does it. I think that obviously a game like Pikmin, that's not going to be 70, and you should not charge 70 for that game. I think that The Legend of Zelda, that's a game that I'd like it to be at 60, obviously, but it's at 70, and I'm buying the special edition anyway, so I was going to buy it for more than 70, but I think that game will work because we're seeing incredible pre-orders across the world at this point, and people just getting hyped for the game and looking forward to buying it. So that's also in a little bit of a different boat, but Nintendo can't do that for every game. You can't charge 70 for the next game in Wario. So I would advise Nintendo, hey, look, you got your big ones like Mario Kart, right? Like the next Mario Kart game or the next major Mario game. Yeah, maybe those, but don't do it for everything. Don't pull it to where you have like your AA type of games and those are 70, or games with not enough content. No, that's not going to work. I don't think it's going to work, even if it is a great game from Nintendo, Microsoft, or Sony. It's one of those things that we're just going to have to wait and see. But overall, I don't think it's working the way that a lot of these publishers thought it was going to work based off of how brash they've been with a lot of these games, especially the new IPs. Just seems mind-boggling to me that you would launch a bunch of new IPs in a competitive market with the limited install base of the Xbox Series and the PlayStation 5. The install base is not massive, and you launch it at those prices, and just how competitive the market is seems kind of crazy to me, but looks like they're paying the price here. Forspoken obviously is flopped at this point, lackluster sales. The studio got folded into Square Enix. Wild Hearts is nowhere on the sales charts. Like, it flopped in Japan. It didn't sell very much. It's nowhere on the sales charts on Amazon or anything. We're not seeing people stream the game. It doesn't have a high peak concurrent rating. Like, it's just not it. Callisto Protocol's pretty much already been forgotten about at this point, despite them fixing some things up. And a lot of these games are just being a part of the past at this point. It's not working so well, but we'll see what happens going forward. I think that the big franchises, those are going to do well, like I talked about with stuff like Final Fantasy and The Legend of Zelda, the next God of War, the next Spider-Man, for example, Spider-Man on the PS5. So that will work, but hey, developers, other games, not so much. So Check out some of my other videos where I've talked about different topics in the industry. We did discuss recently about the Nintendo Switch, some stuff with the term JRPG and more. So if you haven't seen those videos, they'll be right here on the screen for you to watch. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you for the next video. Peace.